Okay, let's do this and say hi, and good evening, and welcome to episode. Are we at 53 tonight? There's a point where I should stop counting. I was having a conversation during the week with somebody who was interviewing me about book clubs and about how they work and how they run online. And I explained to her that when we started doing shelf analysis, this series at the beginning of lockdown 1 back in March, that I was doing it 5 nights a week because I was sure that lockdown was going to last about 4 weeks. And I was going to keep us occupied every weeknight for those 4 weeks. Here we are in November 2020. We are at episode 52, 3. Thank you to everybody who watched Neil Gaiman last week. If you didn't catch the Neil Gaiman episode last week, it was a stonker. Neil was on the Isle of Skye off Scotland with slightly dodgy 5G coverage, but it worked for the vast majority of the time he was talking to me. Recommended some extraordinary books, told some stuff about projects that he has upcoming, and was just generally all round lovely. And yes, I did sing happy birthday to him and blow out 2 candles on a bagel because we didn't have any cake in the house and we were self-isolating last week. Thanks so many for joining us tonight. If you're watching live, either in the Ricochet Book Club or on the Shelf Analysis YouTube channel, you can leave comments, drop comments and questions in the relevant box, and we'll try and get them to our guest between now and the end of the program. I have lots of those myself. There's a few pieces of news to get to you before we go that far, though. I'm going to start with... Let's start with this. I may as well begin with something that I announced and launched over the course of the week, and it is this, of course. If you've been knocking around the Ricochet Book Club for the last couple of years, this is year 3 of our Christmas appeal. Every year we pick a charity and we decide to do some fundraising for them because, in theory, there are 34,000 members of my little book club on the internet. And the idea being that if everybody gave a couple of quid, we could raise a substantial chunk of cash for charity over the course of Christmas. This year's Christmas appeal is being divided between 3 charities. Primarily because I think there are so many charities in Ireland that have lost out on so many fundraising opportunities this year for obvious reasons. So if we can spread the love a little bit more, all the better. I'm going to explain very briefly what the 3 are. They are the DSPCA. That is incredibly selfish of me. It's because we managed to adopt 2 incredible rescue dogs from them a little bit earlier in the year. One of them is sitting here beside me just going, yeah, I know you're doing the telly thing. Don't worry about it. It's fine. So we'd like to raise some funds for them. There is, of course, an unacknowledged mental health crisis going on in Ireland, and lockdown has certainly made that worse for an awful lot of people, many of whom would have known that they were dealing with their mental health, some of whom have never had to before. Samaritans Ireland is our second charity this year. And as we've done for the last couple of years, we are going to try and put some money the way of the Peter McVerry Trust as well, whose work in the field of homelessness I have told you all about and battled on about over the space of the last 3 years or so. So there's nothing new in that. All funds being split 3 ways between the DSPCA, Samaritans Ireland and the Peter McVerry Trust. How do you give some money to this wonderful Christmas appeal, I hear you ask? I'm going to have a look now really quickly. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stick this on screen because apparently I can do this. There is a URL you can use, and it is bit.ly, one of those little bitleys, /ROSBC Christmas Appeal 2020. Also, if that's too complicated, you don't get a chance to write that down right now. You can't freeze the screen. You'll find the details, of course, on my Twitter feed at Ricochet. You'll find it in the Ricochet Book Club as well. I'll be battling on about this lots over the course of the next few weeks. We finished the appeal at New Year's Eve of this year, so the end of December 31st. That's when we finish off the appeal. At the moment, it's been running for 5 days. The current total as of now, as I press refresh on this screen, is €5,626. We are raising roughly €1,000 per day so far with this. Always easier to do at the very beginning, gets harder in the middle, and then it gets easier towards the end again. If you would like to, all we ask is that people donate the cost of a book. If you've got a little bit more and you've had a really good year, or your company has money they'd like to donate to a charity, please do so. Again, the appeal details are there at the bottom of the screen, or you'll find them on my social media or in the Ricochet Book Club as well. On to other things as well. I announced this during the week as well. Normally what we would do every year in the Ricochet Book Club is we would manage to get a chance to have everybody that we know together in one place. We would have a physical, real-world party that happens every year. We're not going to get a chance to do that this year, obviously. So instead, I'm running an online festival. The The festival will run over 4 nights in the middle of December. All of the events are free. Firstly, starting off on the 14th of December, which is a Monday, that's going to be our poetry night. It is the Ricochet Book Club Festival 2020, 8 o'clock, Monday, December 14th. I'm going to have some of Ireland's top poets here to talk about their own poetry, to read some of their own poetry, and to read some of the poetry of those that they loved across the course of 2020. Following night is the Tuesday night. That's going to be Books of the Year. Myself and 3 of the best known authors that we've spoken to on Shelf Analysis over the year, recommending their favorite books of 2020. I'm really excited about that panel because I asked the first 3 people I really wanted to do it, and they all said yes immediately, which was great. Third night is going to be a book quiz. That's Wednesday, December 16th at 8 p.m. It's not going to be a competitive quiz. I'm not going to be able to keep score and nobody wins. This is going to be you playing against yourself at home with friends, family, or whatever you've got. We may have some spot prizes on the night. We'll tell you a little bit more about that the closer we get to it as well. And finally, we're about the last graphic. I'm not very good at this kind of thing. You can tell I don't really do this for a living. The final one is going to be Thursday, December 17th at 8 p.m. And it's the online Christmas party. We can't meet each other in the real world this year. We can't have an actual Christmas party as we've done for the last few years with the Ricochet Book Club. Last year was, a couple of hundred of us in Easton's and O'Connell Street. This year, we're going to do this online. We're going to have some of your favorite authors reading from their own work. We'll do some Christmas stuff. I might try and get some music in there as well. That is all happening online. I encourage you to dress up and to drink large amounts of your favorite beverage for the Christmas party, which is happening Thursday, December 17th at 8 p.m. And that'll be the last show of 2020, and Shelf Analysis will be back at the beginning of 2021. Yes, I've already booked the first guest for 2021. I know. Who said organization wasn't my strong suit? Well, actually, most people said organization wasn't my strong suit. Last one, to give you the quick heads up as well, is last week's book show on RTE Radio 1. We had Jan Carson on it talking about the books of Shirley Jackson, amongst others. If you fancy checking out the book show, it's wherever you get your own podcasts. Just stick in RTE Book Show and you'll find it there. Last week's podcast is there. This coming week on RTE Radio 1 at 7 o'clock. Can I tell you? Yeah, I think I can tell you. We're talking to John Banville. We're going to be talking to Sarah Crossan, who's talking to a book club as well, and that's all coming up this coming Sunday at 7 on RTE Radio 1. Time to shut up, time to get on with the business of the evening. If you've never watched Shelf Analysis before, it's about having a guest come in and talk about books that they themselves love and that they think you might enjoy as well. My guest tonight, if you are a member of the Ricochet Book Club, you will have seen a lot of talk about her book. Her book is called Beyond the Tape. She is the former Chief State Pathologist in Ireland, and I'm pleased to press this button and say hello.
Hello.
Dr. Mary Cassidy. How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Thanks a million for joining us. I'm fantastic, and thanks a million for coming on Shelf Analysis tonight. So, normally the first question I ask of authors when they come on is 2020 and how that year has been for them personally and professionally. I kind of have 2 questions for you. So let me ask you that one first, in that, how is all of this that we've all been through, how has it been treating you?
Actually, I've quite enjoyed it. I'm naturally a bit reclusive, so I've quite enjoyed not having to go anywhere and speak to people. So I've had a great time. I haven't bothered doing banana bread or any of these things. I haven't learned Chinese. I haven't done anything very useful at all. And in fact, you've made me rethink of what I should be doing by asking me onto this, by even looking at what I've been reading and thinking, I should maybe have taken the opportunity to maybe branch out a bit, but I haven't. So I've done really nothing, and it's wonderful.
I think an awful lot of people would have been perfectly happy with nothing, and it's wonderful if they'd managed to do that over the space of the last 8 or 9 months. People have even found that hard. My second question, I suppose, is based on what used to be the day job, which is, I mean, if you had still been the state pathologist now in 2020 and this had happened, have you thought about how different that would have made your day-to-day working life, or would it have made it any different?
Of COVID on people's health, but on the day-to-day running of my business and the interacting with other agencies, that would have been, very, very tricky. I don't know how they're getting on. Hopefully people are just, doing the best they can, but it would have made a huge difference.
Tell me about why you then chose to write the book, because the book is, hang on, let me press the button, I can get the cover up there. It is, it's here. It's called Beyond the Tape, The Life and Many Deaths of a State Pathologist. Why do this?
Because somebody asked me if I wanted to do it. Because when you're asking me about books, I mean, I remember reading a long time ago the Celestine prophecies, and the part of that was that, don't turn down opportunities. If somebody asks you to do something, go for it. And so, and I've been living by that for a long time. So I decided that, if somebody asked me if I wanted to do it, and I said, fine, yeah, I'll give it a go. I said, now, I'm not a writer, so don't expect very much. And if it's really bad, just say to me, look, it's bad, thank you very much, but goodbye. I said, because I won't take it to heart. I won't get upset. And they seemed to quite like it. And hence the book came about.
Yeah, it didn't go that way at all, because the book has done extraordinarily well, and certainly watching the people talk about it in the book club, it's been one of those books that people have grabbed onto, whether it's because they knew who you were already, because the job, whether you liked it or not, was a kind of high profile one.
Yeah, but I think people thought I was a character in a long-running television series, that well-known series called The News. And I don't think people really thought I was real. They just saw me pop up now and again when something awful happened. But there's always been a huge interest. But I was surprised that it's actually done as well as it has done. And that's another reason why I'm quite happy about, being reclusive and now not having to go out and meet up with people. I've just thought, it's like giving away your baby and just let it go and make its own way in the world. And, it might come back to me. I might get hundreds of them returned to me. I don't know. But it's just going to make its own way. And so far, it's been, sort of well received.
Because obviously in an alternate universe, in another 2020 where COVID-19 didn't exist and you had a book out, the normal thing for any author to do, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, would be you'd be in front of rooms full of people at festivals being probably interviewed by somebody like me. How would you have felt about that, or do you know?
Well, I'm quite used to speaking to large audiences because I've spent my whole career talking to rooms full of medical students who've asked very, very probing questions. so that in itself wouldn't bother me. But if I have my choice, I prefer just to stick in the background. So I'm quite happy that I'm not having to meet people face to face.
One of the main reason that we bring people on Shelf Analysis, and the reason the program is here, is we ask people to tell us a little bit about. Go on, you can sort your phone. It's okay. We can see that
it keeps going ringing. It's a terrible thing. It just rings all the time. There we go. Muted.
Well, it's a part popularity, and people obviously know that you're in the middle of doing something. That's the only time anybody's phone ever rings. And tell us a little bit about the books that you've chosen for tonight. Where do you want to start? What's the first one that you want to show us?
Well, the first one, and this is to prove that I am a dinosaur, is, you won't believe it, but it's Jurassic Park. And you can see by the state of it. When you were asking me about, books that you've enjoyed and that you give on to other people, the big problem with that is they very rarely come back. So I was looking at all my shelves and I was thinking, oh, that's never come back. This is the only one that's really ever come back to me. And it was because if you've taken it, it's historical really, because in that time that was coming out in the early 1990s, and I had just come into forensic pathology in 1985, and when I came into forensic pathology, forensic science was in its infancy, and we didn't have all of this wonderful technology that we have nowadays. And after a couple of years, we heard it through the grapevine that there was this new technology coming through, DNA profiling, and we were all going, "Oh, wonderful! This is going to change our lives. It's going to catch every criminal." And the more I heard about it, the more I began to think, maybe this is a bit sinister, and maybe it isn't such a good thing. And then this book came out, and I was going, see, I was right all along. Terrible things can happen. We could be overrun by dinosaurs. But it really made me think about how we use and embrace technology. And actually, it's a great read. It really is. I mean, most of the people that probably listen to you are a lot younger. They probably weren't even born when this was coming out. But it was a great read, and I just gave it to everybody. I used to go to everybody and say, just have a read at that. You'll know what's coming. This is the future. This is the future. And it's true. I mean, technology has taken off, and it's changed the face of our lives. And now we're talking about, genetic modification, and, it trips off the tongue nowadays. So we're now well used to it. But it brought the scientists out of the laboratories, out of the universities, really, out of their comfort zones of being, just involved in research. Just suddenly they were thrown into big business, and suddenly scientists were becoming businessmen, and there was a lot of money. And, it was really very interesting. So reading that, I thought, oh, this is the way forward. And as I say, nowadays we're just so used to it, we don't even think about it. But in those days, it was a big thing for me because I was busy trying to solve crimes, and I couldn't get a DNA analysis. And here's these people making dinosaurs out of the damn thing. So yeah, I just found it really interesting, and as I say, a great read. That's all you want with a good story.
I'm fairly sure, even though I'm not really mad about, movie tie-in cover versions of books, I'm 100% sure I had that very version of that book when it came out at the time. It kind of leads me just briefly to go backwards, because I don't suppose I've really thought about this way before. I mean, the job that you started to do, the job when you initially went to college, the job that you thought you were signing on for, and then when you started working, and up until, the point where you're now, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, it's a completely different universe. I mean, that field has changed almost as fast as anything else. Was that something that you just had to keep running to keep up with?
Yes, I mean, it's strange because the field of forensic pathology itself hasn't changed very much. What we do and how we do it is the very same as going back to the 1800s. I mean, it's not really changed that much, but the technology around crime investigation has changed. And that, of course, has made us change sometimes how we approach things. It hasn't really changed very much the essence of my job, but it may mean that, again, the big thing now is talking about PPE, protective clothing. I mean, and when I came in at first, I had to sort of hunt around in the mortuary in the first days saying, can anybody give me a pair of gloves to put on, please? And they were going, oh, what a pansy she is, roll up your sleeves, girl, and get on with it. And now it's not to protect me, it's so that I don't distribute my DNA and I don't contaminate evidence. So we had to think about how our practices might impinge on the new technology. But I mean, my equipment hasn't changed. We now have an electric saw rather than a saw. But everything else is just entirely the same.
That's utterly fascinating. I wouldn't have thought that at all. Breda says in comments, read Mary's book. I'm halfway through the audio version, and I'm absolutely loving it. It's a fascinating read. How do you feel about that? About an audiobook? How did you take to that?
The same way as I took to writing the book. They said, would you like to do the audiobook? And I said, really? I said, you not get somebody famous to do it? They said, well, we prefer, it's probably because it's cheaper to get me to do it.
Maybe.
That's probably, they didn't have to pay me. They would have to have paid somebody to come in to do it. And again, I said, look, I'll do it. But that's not what I do for a living. I said, so it might be a bit stilted. I said, my only foray into, sort of the arts was, the school play. And I never got over it because, coming up for the nativity play, and I was a shoo-in for Mary because I was about the smallest in the class and I had long dark hair. You wouldn't believe it now. And it was always going to be Mary nativity play, and I got passed over for another girl. I was distraught, so it made me the innkeeper's daughter, and that changed my whole life. And I blame Sister Tress on that. My whole life fell apart after that.
Okay, let's have a look at the second book that you've chosen for us tonight. Then what's that going to be?
Right. Well, because of the work I do, you might think it rather odd that I read crime fiction.
I think that makes total sense to me. Complete sense to me.
And I think it's partly because they're easy reads for me, because I can read them and switch off. I don't have to think too much about what's going on because I understand that world. And to be fair, most of the authors get it right, mainly because they ask me before they write anything. So I read all the Irish writers. I read all the Scottish writers and all the international writers. And as I say, again, my apologies to everybody in the audience, but I have got one of these. And when I looked through it during lockdown, I thought, oh dear girl, you've got to branch out a bit. You can't keep immersing yourself in death all your life. So I had to think long and hard again about who would I recommend. And again, it comes back down to looking at the ones that I find, again, that I've given to everybody. And this is the only one I've got left out of his series because it's the only one he's signed for me. If it's not signed, I'll give it away. And I just say, this is a good read, have it. Christopher Brookmeyer. And this one, Be My Enemy. I'll not tell you what the subtitle is because I don't suppose I'm allowed to swear on these programs.
It's the internet. You can say anything you want, Mary.
Oh, I can. Well, it's Be My Enemy or Fuck This for a Game of Soldiers. And it's crime at its best, and it's hilarious. It's so funny. I mean, somebody, said that it was, one of these genres where, it's a cross between, sort of real violence, the real Scottish Glasgow violence with a bit of Braveheart thrown in, and then Mr. Bean on top of it. And it is just, I mean, it's a hard read sometimes, but it is so funny. And every single one of his books, you only have to look at the titles and you start to giggle. And from all of the crime writers, if you're not great into crime, I would start there. And as I say, he'll introduce you into the world of crime, and while you're laughing, you'll then think, oh, maybe this isn't so bad, and we'll go on to the real hardcore stuff.
You have consulted on a few things like that over the years, I'm sure. Like, who was talking to you? What did you enjoy most? What strange moments did you have with authors?
Oh, I used to love it. And funny enough, just in the last couple of weeks, actually, I was speaking to Scottish author Alex Gray, who does crime novels in Glasgow. She's based just outside of Glasgow.
I'm going to ask you to scroll back there again, because what happened was the moment you started giving us a brilliant answer, the internet just went, that's it, we're done. Just give me that answer again, because the internet was censoring you in some way.
Oh, I'm not surprised. No, but a couple of weeks ago, I got back in touch with an old friend of mine. She's an author, Alex Gray. She's based just outside of Glasgow. And I met her long time ago. And it was probably in the 1990s, not the 1890s, the 1990s. And she came along to me and said that she was thinking of writing crime books, and could I, sort of have a chat with her? And I said, sure, come down to the mortuary. And in those days, we didn't really think too much about health and safety concerns, and people didn't worry about who was wandering into mortuaries. And nobody turned a hair, and neither did she, to be fair. And she came in and watched me doing a post-mortem. And she then based the pathologist in her books on me. And I've never grown old. Isn't that wonderful? I'm still the small blonde, because I'd gone blonde by that time. So I was a small blonde in all of her books. And as I say, I haven't aged. It's the only way I haven't aged. But we used to get people coming in all the time. And the same when I was in Ireland, we'd have Sam Blake, Liz Nugent, Alex Barclay. I mean, they would all come along and say, look, I've got this idea and this is going to happen, and I want this to be as realistic as possible. And I just loved that, and loved chatting with them and saying, no, that won't work. Where do you want this to go? And do you want them to die? It's dreadful things. Do you want to die quickly, or do you want them to be unconscious and survive for it and go through all the permutations? The only problem with that is, even though, bless them, they were so kind and they would send me copies of the book and they were all signed and lovely little notes in them, I would think, but I know what's going to happen. You've kind of ruined the book for me. I know what the punchline is. I've always loved that. And the same with Taggart and those kind of programs. It's just so much fun seeing the fiction side of it.
You have been your own spoiler when it comes to books, which is an unusual situation for anybody to be in. Zoe Miller says, Mari looks and sounds far too nice to be the sort of person who wields an electric saw. That seems fair. Melanie says, the audiobook feels so authentic with Mari reading it. I'm really loving it. Where are you going to go next? What's your next choice? Right.
Well, again, I was looking through what I've been reading recently, and I have been trying to sort of change my ways a little bit and maybe move out into other genres. And when there was a whole big thing, I know there's been nothing happening, but there's been a lot happening in the world over the last few months. And when all of this thing came about the Black Lives Matters, and I was thinking, people are asking me all the time, did you ever, get prejudiced because you're a woman? And I was thinking, just because somebody calls me doll or hen or something like that, I can't get really upset by it. And I thought, I really need to, like everybody else, I need to educate myself. But again, I thought, how do I do it, softly, not to just sort of get into the sort of brutal effects of things. And I thought, well, I'll have a look and see what there is fiction-wise, and maybe start from there and sort of open myself up to what is happening to people and talk about racism and particularly African Americans. And so my next one is, and again, I apologize, I know it's on Kindle, but we've been locked down, I can't get near bookshops, An American Marriage. And I mean, this is a story about racism. It's about love, actually. It's a love story. And it's a love story that shows you what can happen. And what interests me was I don't want to spoil it for anybody if they do want to read it, but it just shows you when the justice system goes wrong, what can happen. And not just what happens to the person, but what happens, the ripple effect, how it affects all of the family, and then how the families, people in families come to terms with things that happen. And it's a really lovely story, and it's done in a very nice way because again, it's difficult to tell you about it, but something happens and this man ends up in prison. And it's letters, he writes letters and she writes letters back. And it's, they're love letters, but they're not. There's something deep below that. And it was just so nice, but it opened my eyes into thinking, I don't know what prejudice is. I haven't really come across it. I remember coming to Ireland and people used to say to me all the time, what are you doing here? Who are you? You're Scottish. And I'd go, I've got a name, Cassidy. I couldn't be more Irish if I tried. I've spent my whole time in Scotland trying to prove that I was Scottish and not Irish. And now I come to Ireland, you're saying, no, you're not Irish, you're Scottish.
Yeah.
Well, I can get how it can happen, but not on a daily basis, just because of the colour of your skin, just because of the way you talk. And I just thought, until you walk in somebody's shoes, you really have no idea at all what's going on in people's lives. And that's, as I say, it's not a very long book, but it's very interesting, and it's opened up the ways. So I've now got a whole load of other ones to read. I've got a pile which is higher than me, which isn't really too hard to be higher than me, of all these things that I will get round to one of these days. Even with lockdown and not being allowed to do anything, I still it still takes a while to get through everything.
That's gateway reading. One book leads its way to 12 others. We've been there before. Do you have another one you want to choose, or what else are you going to do here?
Well, again, when you're thinking about books, and coming back to homegrown, and getting Louise O'Neill, and again, I had long chats with Louise about her plot. I can't say that I was instrumental in writing the book or anything else, but again, from my point of view, again, talking about prejudice, this is very different prejudice, and it's not, because of the colour of your skin. Again, it's from where you come from. I mean, as I say, when I came to Ireland, I met the same kind of prejudice as a Scottish person coming into the country, and this again is talking about, the lairds coming in, the English lairds coming in and taking over, and all sorts of things. And it's again a really fantastic plot. I wasn't quite sure where it was going to end. It's it's very well written. It's very, I don't want to sound racist either, but it's very Irish in that, where it's, the setting of it, and it's, you really can feel you are there, and you're living in that little island, and you're living in that sort of close community, and then you've got the big house on the hill where they're lording it over, and it's really a really good read, and I never got the end. I would never have made a detective. I mean, I might have been a very good pathologist, but I would never have made a detective because I never get it right. I never get the person who done it right. But again, Louise has done another great job, as she always does. So again, and I'm sure a lot of your readers will have had this one on their shelves recently because, again, it's been out for a few weeks now. But again, great read. And as I say, most of the Irish ones are the great reads.
Yeah, if people want to have a look back, Louise was a guest on Shelf Analysis about maybe 7 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, maybe a little bit more. There's an episode there with her as well. Do you have one more for me, or are you going to cut it at that? Is that your?
Well, the other one I had, which surprised me, I must admit, and again, it wasn't a book that I would have picked up normally, but don't want to promote Graham because I think he earns a lot more money than I'll ever have earned in my lifetime. And I wasn't really expecting very much, and I thought again it was not expected from Graham Norton. It's a nice little book. It's a nice read, and again I like a story. I'm like everybody else. I really just like something that just captivates me, takes me away somewhere else. I get involved in somebody else's lives. The things I did deal with or dealt with on a daily basis, I really just want to sort of go in somewhere nice and fluffy, and I'm not one for great romantic stuff, but I like to live in somebody else's world that doesn't have to deal with the horrible things that I normally deal with. And again, nice little story. Nothing very much does happen. Again, it's about the intrigues in the family and how people fall out and coming of age. And again, he talks about him being a gay man and how that was affected in Ireland. And I think I seem to tend to be leaning towards people having a hard time because of their race, their colour, their religion, whatever. And I always find those things fascinating because I hope that I'm very inclusive in how I deal with people and how I speak to people. But I always find it intriguing why people are so either concerned about other people's lives or, just go on with living, for goodness sakes. It's short enough, for goodness sakes, sit back and enjoy it.
Just maybe before we finish, I have one question for you, which is, now that you've written a book of nonfiction about yourself and about your work, and given that you have, consulted on other people's work in the past, would it give you, a taste to try something yourself, to try writing a novel?
Well, again, I have been asked, and I thought, well, I could maybe try. And so maybe try and put something on paper. And again, no expectations. It'll keep me off the wine for a little while longer, during the day. Give me something to do. So yeah, I might embark on something.
That is fantastic news. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. The book is called Beyond the Tape. It is the life and many deaths of a state pathologist. And Dr. Mary Cassidy, thanks a million so much for joining us tonight on Shelf Analysis. Thank you.
Delighted to come and speak to you.
We've got one more. Wait, it's here we go. Sorry. Really love hearing Mary's voice. She's fantastically engaging. One question finished. Suzanne says, did you ever think about the stories or lives of the people who came into the morgue? Or is dissociation and emotional detachment a necessary part of the job? It's a good question.
That's a fantastic question, actually, because when I'm there and in the moment, I have to be detached. But at some point, I have to face them, and I have to face the families. I do have to come and hear about who this person was and hear their backstory. But luckily, that comes weeks and months later, and then I can deal with it as you would deal with, feeling a bit, with empathy and sympathy. But it's not going to affect what I've, what I have to do professionally, because then that's all done and dusted. That's in the past. So now I can just be, the nice wee woman that gives you a hug and goes, there, dear. Hopefully it'll all be better now. Now you can maybe start to move on. So no, and it does, and I'm dreadful for that. And I know some of the corners they'll go, oh Jesus, she's about to go. When I'm hearing the stories, I'm busy going, and I'm thinking I'm not being much use here at all. And man up, girls, sort of deal with the situation. But no, you do. And when you hear how it has affected people, then, you can't help but think, oh my God, there but for the grace of God go I.
I hope to talk to you when the next book comes out, whenever that may be. Mary Cassidy, thanks a million. Cheers.
Thank you.
And that was Dr. Mary Cassidy. Thanks a million for watching Shelf Analysis tonight. Before you go anywhere, next week there are 2 episodes of Shelf Analysis and not just one. Bear with me because there's a very good reason why. I've talked to a lot of people over the last while, and they've been asking questions about what sort of books they can buy for their kids or for kids who are in their lives, their nieces, nephews, kids of friends. And I don't always have the right answers to this. However, I know people who do, and it's terrible that Sarah Webb is hidden behind my ugly mug. Shelf Analysis next Tuesday afternoon at 3:30 in the afternoon. So either you can watch with the kids if the kids are around, or if not, you can watch with them later in the day or watch by yourself later that evening. You'll be able to watch it on Watchback. I've got Lorraine Levis. I've got David O'Callaghan from Eason's, and Sarah Webb, who's immediately behind my picture there. Sorry, Sarah. And they're going to be recommending books for kids right the way from incredibly young ages all the way up as far as YA. That's live again on Shelf Analysis next Tuesday at 3:30 in the afternoon. It's a rare one. We never do ones in the afternoon, but we thought that might be a good time to do that. This time next week on Shelf Analysis, I am going to be thrilled to talk to Frank Cotterill-Boyce is my guest next Wednesday night at 8 p.m. You again may know him through his kids' writing. You may know him through his screenwriting. He's been responsible for some of my favorite movies over the last 15 years and writing the screenplays for them as well. He's an incredibly well-known children's author. I talked to him recently on the book show on Radio 1, and I thought we'll have a bit of a chat, and maybe you can come on and tell us about some books that you love. So that's Frank Cotterill-Boyce is going to be my guest on Shelf Analysis this night next week. One final plug. Thank you so much for being so nice. The Christmas appeal continues. We're fundraising for the DSPCA, the Samaritans, and the Peter McVerry Trust. If you enjoy Shelf Analysis, if you enjoy the 53, 54 episodes that I've knocked out here and that hasn't cost you a penny, maybe you'll consider throwing a few quid the way of charities that we're raising money for this year. You'll find, again, all of the details either here. Look, I'm going to stick it up on the screen again to you. Just going to make it nice and easy for you. bit.ly/ROSBC Christmas Appeal 2020. Or you'll find it on my Twitter. You will find it in the Ricochet Book Club and all the details there. I will a very big noise about it between now and Christmas. And thanks a million for your donations. Other than that, it's been a lovely evening. Thank you so much for coming on. I'll catch you again next week with the 2 episodes that we have on Tuesday and on Wednesday as well. I hopefully will come back into the bigger part of the picture here at some point. Can we try? There you go. Thank you very much indeed. And I'll catch you on RTE Gold tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. and of course on the book show on RTE Radio 1 this coming Sunday evening at 7 o'clock. Till then, I'll see you next week. Take it handy.